Episode 204, IRONMAN Cozumel with Michael Ramirez. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pursuit of the Perfect Race. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Michael Ramirez about his recent race at IRONMAN Cozumel that took place on November 18th, 2018. The temperature on race day was 71 and rose to 84, with the water temperature being 81 degrees. Michael's time this year was 15 hours, 23 minutes, and 13 seconds, and he has a great deal of information and knowledge to share about his race and race experience. Welcome to the show, Michael. I look forward to talking about your race at Cozumel.
Hey, Terry. Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, you're welcome. So what made you want to do this race and sign up for it?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm trying to punch a ticket, man. I'm kind of new to long course triathlon, and I thought that I had the ability to put together a good race and to try and get myself to Kona. And this race looked like, in terms of positioning and timing, like the one that might have been able to get me there. And as is evident from your intro, it ended up not being what I expected, but that's the reason why I signed up. I'm trying to punch a ticket to get to Hawaii.
Wow. So going into this race, this was obviously not your first Ironman, but what number Ironman is this for you?
Yeah, so this was my third Ironman. I did Ironman Texas in 2015. I did Ironman Chattanooga a couple of years ago, and then I've done several 70.3s. I've done NOLA, I've done Austin, I've done Florida. And then I decided to tee up Cozumel as my A race this year.
Wow. So going into this race, what was your training like?
Yeah, so I was real thankful to have had a lot of training and some really specific training with RX3 Performance. Harold Wilson was my coach. And, it's the typical long course training where you get your workouts on Training Peaks, and you have a regimen that is typically on a daily basis, either swim, bike, or run. Real early on in the process, it included some strength training in the gym, a lot of core training that is in this world sometimes atypical. A lot of coaches are against strength training and core training and that kind of thing. And I had a real candid conversation with Harold Wilson and told him I thought it was important, particularly given my age, that we throw some of that in, and he agreed. And so it was the basic regimen of swim, bike, run that it looks to have increased on a percentage basis of about 10% every couple of weeks or so until the end, once you hit the magical taper. And then you tapered up a little bit, and then I ended up going to Cozumel and trying to tee up a good race.
Right. Now, just a little bit more background of Harold. Harold has a bachelor's in kinesiology and exercise physiology, and he also has a master's in biomechanics. So It's not like he's just another triathlon coach out there. He actually has a lot of information and knowledge in the sport, and he's been doing this for more than 15 years now.
Yeah, Harold's been around the game both as a coach and an athlete for many years, and what I found appealing about Harold is that he's got knowledge of not just the physical aspect of triathlon, whether it's long course or short course, but he's got an incredible wealth of knowledge as to nutrition and as to recovery and as to the science behind it. And I've been racing in one form or another for over 25 years, whether it's bike racing crits or stage races, and then transitioning from that into triathlon. Initially, it was, sprint races and short course races and then ollie races. And I've had a few coaches around that sort of spit a good game, but Harold was really one that was demonstrated an innate ability to be able to overcome the problems that I had as an individual athlete and give me information that made me better. And he is not only learned it in terms of education because of his degrees that he got from the University of Texas in Austin, but he gets it because he lines up like all of us athletes do. And he grinds it out himself. So that's what I liked about Harold. He spends time not only on the computer studying numbers and power and the things that you need mechanically to get yourself going, but he also spends time learning your nutrition, your dietary needs, and your nutrition needs during the race time that I think are so beneficial, because a large part of this game, as I'm sure you know, Terry, is being able to fuel your body while you're racing, and leading up to that, learning what it is during the training process to put the pieces of the chemistry together so you can fuel your body, not just to finish the race, but to finish well and feeling healthy and not dying when you're going across the finish line. And
Right.
Harold's really good at that.
Right. So what was your actual training like as far as the delivery? I know you used Training Peaks, but what were you actually doing? Were you doing heart rate based training, power based training? What does this look like?
Yeah. So I'm a power based athlete. I know that there are some coaches that a lot of their ideas center around heart rate and heart rate zones and that kind of thing. And it just didn't work for me. I don't know if it's because my heart rate was just different, or because I just was never able to sort of settle into the lower zones that some heart rate training lends itself to. But Harold found that the most productive way for me to demonstrate growth and potential was focusing on power. And so I use Garmin vectors and run those off my Garmin computer. And when I started really studying the power zones and really maximizing my power zone efficiency, that's when my gains started to go through the roof and started to make me a lot more competitive.
So with your power-based training, are you using zone training within these? How are you coming up with your different zones? Are you doing FTP tests? I'm sure, but
Yeah.
what does this look like from your perspective as an athlete?
Yeah, so on the machine, you do your FTP testing from time to time whenever it is that Coach Wilson would give me, that test to kind of see how have you grown. And your FTP, sometimes it can change depending on whether you're feeling strong or whether you're, deeper in the training process and getting a little fatigued. And so he's constantly monitoring those power numbers to make sure that you maximize your returns and your wattage returns, with an eye towards coming up with a race plan the day that you race that allows you enough in the tank to put together a nice run. And on runs, you have your typical fartlek test that he does to make sure that you are maximizing your abilities when you transition from the machine to the runs. And at the end, you come up with some numbers that become pretty static. They become pretty solid in terms of where you're at within a certain window. And I'm guessing that what he does is take an average or percentage of those numbers and says, look, based on what I've seen over the course of, a year, this is what I think you should put together for your race. And so far he's been spot on.
Nice. So going into this race, what was your longest swim, bike, and run workouts?
So swim workouts are typically towards the end, 4K. I was swimming around 4K. And doing 4K in around 1 hour, 1 hour 15, 1 hour 12, 1 hour 13, somewhere in that range. And then longest bikes. I live in the hill country. I live in the hill country here in Texas, in between San Antonio and Austin. So bike rides here are typically, rich with a lot of hill work. And so I'll put, in terms of hours, I'll put a 6-hour bike ride in, 7-hour bike ride in, which will end up being between 96 and 113 miles, 115 miles. But it's a lot of hill work, so you really have to kind of tailor your wattage and your performance to what the geography or topography gives you. So the longest bike I've had is 7 hours, and the longest swim is 4K. And then the runs, runs are usually, long runs are 3 hours, 3 to 3.5 hours, long runs that we put together.
Wow. So as your volume and intensity increases, how do you and Harold mitigate the risk of getting injured?
So I'm real big on using Normatex. There's two things that I think are critical in terms of like the physicality of recovery, and then in terms of nutrition. So physicality, the first thing I usually do when I'm done with a long session is I do ice baths. Ice baths, I think, are hugely critical to help relieve inflammation in terms of exterior things that I can do for my body. And then I'm a real huge fan of Normatec recovery boots. A lot of people have different opinions of recovery boots and recovery systems. And I've used several different kinds and found that Normatec are indeed the very best in the market. And I think that they are incredibly useful in helping to eliminate lactic acid and just to help recover. And I've got a sponsorship by a company called Pain Pod.
What is this?
Pain Pods are basically like almost like a TENS unit, but it's a TENS unit on steroids, kind of. You put these electrodes on your different body parts that you might have problems with. For example, your IT bands or your Achilles tendon or your calves, different parts of your body. Hell, even the bottom of your feet, you can use them. And it sends electric waves to those muscles to try and fatigue them, to help relax them. And then it also sends some kind of stimulative, electric measurement to your feet or whatever it is. And it kind of calms your nerves down. So I've used different TENS units before, particularly on my low back, especially after bike racing for so many years, and found that these Pain Pods are amazing. I got turned on to them when I was in Kona, and they are by far one of the best recovery tools in conjunction with ice baths and the Normatec recovery boots that I've ever used. I think they're amazing. They're really, really good stuff.
Wow. So I know you're using EFS nutrition and you're wanting to get about 330 calories per hour with an additional 1,000 milligrams of sodium. What does this look like for you as far as nutrition, and how did you get to this point of getting this nutrition in?
Yeah, so I did a sweat test, and I figured out that I didn't really need the sweat test to know that I was a real heavy sweater, but I kind of wanted to know, the science behind it, like how much do I need to help me recover? Because I think on long course that there's really two things that we need in terms of fuel to keep us going. The first is sugar and the next is salt. After a while, if you're like most people, I'd like to think I'm kind of like a lot of people. You can only take so much sugar before you kind of feel nauseous and bloated and just feel sick to your stomach. And one of the ways to counterbalance that, whether it's the placebo or just reality, is to kind of put some salt in things. And so I did a sweat test, and Harold helped me read those numbers, or Coach Wilson, and he kind of figured out, look, based on your size, how much you're sweating, this is how much salt you need. And then what I do is I study all the numbers that you get from your devices. It doesn't make sense to have a badass Garmin wristwatch or, real kick-ass Garmin computer if you don't really read the data that comes out of that. And so a lot of people sometimes ignore that data. And I didn't. I sat down with my coach and said, hey, man, this tells me that I'm burning this many calories. And this watch tells me on these runs for 3 hours, I'm burning this many calories. So my guess is while it would be really, really difficult in terms of liquid to get that many calories in your body, unless you like maybe create a super, bottle of whatever, infinite or whatever it may be, I want to get as close to that as I can with an eye towards trying to minimize the total amount of caloric burn that I have, and at least give me some steady influx of calories so that I can maintain the long course. And by doing that, you come up with the sugar amount and with the salt amount that you should take in to help keep yourself kind of fueled and going. And that number, I found I was burning around between 500 and 700 something calories per hour, depending on what of the three disciplines I was doing. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to get all that much in there, because if I'm trying to take that many calories, I would get nauseous. And so I came up with a number just by, trial and error of using EFS and waxy maize and adding some salt and doing things to create a bottle that I thought was the perfect bottle. And that's what I came up with. I think that EFS was the easiest on my stomach, the easiest to digest. I coupled it with unflavored waxy maize and then put some salt in it, and Himalayan sea salt and some magnesium and potassium tablets. And boom, I came up with some magic potion that really helped me a lot. And I really focused hard, no matter how I felt, on consuming at least one bottle per hour, whether it was on the machine or on the run. I make up all of my own nutrition and focus on that, and then kind of supplement with whatever it may be on course that they have. When my mouth got sick of all the sweets, I would, put a little water in and swizzle it in my mouth and swallow a little bit and spit some out so I didn't get bloated.
Okay. So do you have any dietary restrictions? Are you vegan, vegetarian? Are you gluten tolerant? What is all this? And then also, what nutrition companies have you went through to get to where you're at right now with EFS?
Yeah, so I don't have any real dietary restrictions. I don't, by choice, I don't really use dairy, and I don't really use any wheat products or bread or anything like that. I'm 50 years old, so it's hard to stay lean. And the more weight you carry, whether it's water weight or fat or muscular weight, it's the older you get, I think the more difficult it is to kind of get yourself across the line. And I also race bikes, and I don't like to carry all that weight if I can help it on the machine. So I choose to stay away from those products. One, because I think they add a little bit of fat on me, and two, there's an inflammatory process that results when you put dairy products and gluten or wheat and that kind of thing in your body. So I stay away from that on purpose. And in terms of things that I've gone through, I've done F2C, and I've done Infinite Nutrition. And quite frankly, I think between those two, I think F2C is a far better product than Infinite. I think F2C Nutrition, their concept of being able to specifically tailor nutrition to each individual athlete, is well served for people that are both new to the game and seasoned. I think F2C is a really good product. I think they care a lot about their product, and just because I think they make a fantastic product that takes out of the equation all the sort of chemistry that I have to do, putting all these pieces together to create my perfect bottle. My thought is to just communicate with them directly and say, look, this is what I'm doing. Here's the chemical makeup of what I need, and here are the macros of what I need. Can you guys just make me this formula? And they have the ability, and indeed they pride themselves on being able to make a specific formula tailored to each specific athlete. So I haven't done that yet this season, but my thought is about doing that next season in 2019.
Okay. So going into Cozumel this time, what specific workouts did you do that gave you the confidence going to this race, not only mentally, but also physically prepared?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I did with Scott Burrow, who was a fantastic athlete out of Boulder, Colorado, with Chris Big Sexy McDonald, who's a professional athlete out of Colorado, and with Harold, was made my way a second year to Kona and did the swim course with those guys on a day that was less than optimal. And the reason I did that is because if you look at my race pedigree, the races that I've done have always been in freshwater. And I kind of wanted to get the sense of a big ocean, open water swim. I wanted to get the sense of the buoyancy difference in salt water versus freshwater. And quite frankly, I just wanted to get some confidence in swimming in deeper, bigger water where I was having to negotiate the obstacles of currents and swell and, jellyfish and those kind of things myself for Mexico. And so the biggest thing that I did in terms of trying to develop a measure of confidence that was separate and apart from that's on land was spending some time in the ocean. And for anyone that's thinking about doing their first Ironman in the ocean or any Ironman in the ocean for the first time, I think that's invaluable sort of experience to get out in the water with somebody that knows what they're doing, to get on their feet, and then to get away from them, to get off their feet, to feel of, the pool, the water pool versus no water pool, and just to feel the difference of being in big, large open water as opposed to in a smaller body of fresh water. That's one of the biggest things I did. And then the other thing I did, which is sort of counterintuitive to some people just because it's kind of lonely, I spend all my time on the bike, Terry. I spend all my time training solo. I don't often get into group rides. And another psychology behind, being with other people sometimes brings out the best in you and brings out the competitive nature in you and that kind of thing. And I don't know. I mean, we're long course triathletes. There is no drafting allowed in triathlon, and you don't ride in pelotons in triathlon, and you don't shoot the breeze and and hobnob with people in triathlon. So I kind of figure I can get an extra edge by learning that sort of the strategy behind being alone and racing or training hard alone, and kind of battling your own mental demons alone, as opposed to being in a group of people. So that's another thing that gave me a great measure of confidence, is just being alone so frequently on my bike rides, and learning how to battle by myself, the elements by myself, without the comfort of anyone else pulling for me or, setting up an echelon for me to block wind or anything like that. I think that gave me a great measure of confidence. And in terms of mechanics, another thing that I do is I rely very, very heavily on my mechanic and my local pro shop to help make sure that my equipment is state of the art in terms of my bike. I think that gives me a great measure of confidence as well. And I do something a little more unique, because I'm a little bit older and I'm really working hard to try to get to Kona, is I have a race manager, a guy named Ricardo Reyna, that helps me study all the information that I get from Harold in terms of my production, in terms of my sleep, in terms of nutrition, in terms of just mileage on my shoes, mileage on my chain. When it's time to bring my bike to the shop, a lot of those details, I just don't have time or quite frankly, the skill set that he has as a manager to get those things done. And I know some people may think that's overkill, but that's kind of how serious I am to trying to get to Hawaii. And so I rely on a guy named Rick Reyna, who is really good at numbers and fantastic at just the strategy of putting things together for me. And that helps a lot.
So what all does he actually do?
So Rick, I give Rick all daily. I give him all my data that I get from my results on my day's workouts. So Coach Wilson will kind of comment on my workouts and tell me where I need to pick it up or where I need to kind of, tone it down a little bit. And I give all that data to Rick. And then Rick will kind of create a flow chart on Excel, and kind of you can demonstrate by that, as opposed to doing some of the things that I'm not that good at on Training Peaks. Rick kind of creates this document that I do understand, and I can study that document on a weekly basis and kind of see my growth. And then he helps the simple things like I'm a real big advocate of changing shoes out, for example, on my run. A lot of times real early on in this process, when I translated from bike racing to triathlon, I was having all kinds of pain, knee pain, hip pain, ankle pain, low back pain, spaz pain. And it was determined that a lot of it had to do with my lack of knowledge about shoe replacement. I just didn't know. And so a couple of coaches that I run with were telling me, hey, man, you need to start rotating your shoes out. Well, I would go through a system where I'd mark little marks on my shoes or do whatever. And finally, it just became a kind of a pain in the ass. And so I was telling my manager about it, Rick, and Rick's like, hey, dude, no problem. Just you let me know when you buy your shoes. You send me your workouts. You use the same shoes for the workouts, and then I'll tell you when it's time to replace your shoes. So what I do is I'm on a program where it's 2 months or 300 miles, whichever comes first, and I get new shoes. And I give Rick my credit card, and Rick just orders my shoes for me and makes sure that I always have fresh shoes. And then I rotate them out when he tells me to, and keep a fresh pair of shoes. And that has done huge things to help keep me pain-free and injury-free, which kind of circles back to your original question. What kind of things do you do, or does Harold do to make sure that you stay injury-free? That's one of them, that, they work kind of together in combination with one another to make sure that I'm always on the front end of my shoe replacement, of making sure that my bike fit hasn't changed, making sure that it's time to replace my cleats, for example, on my cycling shoes, anything they can to eliminate some of those X factor type movements that can lend themselves to injury is what Rick takes advantage of as my manager, of giving me the information and the knowledge, timing when it is to do stuff. And that's what he does.
Nice. So going into this race, what was the most hours you trained in 1 week?
God, Terry, I'd probably say I was training the most hours, maybe like 30, 33 hours a week.
33 hours in 1 week.
Yeah.
So what do you do for a full-time job?
So I'm an attorney. I'm a lawyer and I own my law firm. And so I have the luxury of being able to sort of come and go as I want. And so towards the end, when it came time to really start ramping up my training to get me prepared for Cozumel, I kind of turned things over to some lawyers that work with me and my partners and kind of spend most of my time focused on training.
Wow. So being that you have a full-time job, you also train quite a bit. Do you have family as well?
I do, yeah. So I'm married and I have 2 kids. I have a son who's in his orthopedic residency at Dartmouth in New Hampshire. And then I have a daughter who's a junior at the University of Texas at Austin. Is going to be a teacher. And then I have my wife who's the brains behind the operation. Her name is Kelly. And she is a manager at USAA, the insurance company here in San Antonio.
Wow.
And they're huge fans. They're real big supporters of Ironman. You know, Kelly goes to all my races, and my daughter, I don't know if you got a chance to look at on Facebook, but you know, this was the first race that my daughter's had a chance to come see, and she was really excited about checking it out as well.
Nice.
Yeah. My son Cody seen me do the state championship in bike rate and road racing, Michelob Ultra State Championship in Copperas Cove, Texas. So they've been around for a long time, kind of watching different things, you know. And I'm real thankful for that. They support me a lot.
Okay. So going into this race, how are you able to balance life, work, and training? Because you're getting up to 33 hours a week of training. You also have a wife and 2 kids that you need to kind of communicate with. And then you also have to work. So how do you balance all these?
Well, I try to be as efficient with my time as possible. You know, there's only 24 hours in a day. And, you know, we need a lot of sleep to recover, especially if you're going to try to do a long course race efficiently and effectively. And so what I do is I'm super efficient with my time. And this is where kind of Rick Reyna comes into play. I do a calendar every week. A lot of people, they focus their attention only on their daily routine, on their daily workouts, that if a coach sends it on Training Peaks. I kind of look at the entire week, and I create a full week calendar that includes not just my workouts, but my work day, my sleep, and, you know, everything in between. And I create a colored calendar for the entire week. And I'm religious about following that calendar. I don't deviate from it at all, because I find that if you do deviate, then you end up kind of sacrificing on one thing or the other, and I had to be really disciplined to follow that calendar. So that's exactly what I do.
So who all has access to this calendar?
I'm the only one that has access to the calendar, and Rick has access to the calendar. Nobody else.
Okay, because I would feel like it might make things easier if your wife knows what's going on with your day-to-day life in the future, so that way she can kind of have an idea of what's going on, where you'll be, how much training you have this week, and all that.
Yeah. So, well, you know, Kelly, what we do is we know that during the week, there's really not much we can do during the week, you know, Monday through Friday. And so we just don't even really think about it, to be honest with you, Terry. And then on the weekend, she knows that Saturdays are my long bike days and Sundays are long run days. And that usually happens real early in the morning. And so if we're going to do something, we typically plan it in the afternoons on Saturdays or Sundays, at least while I'm preparing for a long race. And that's kind of the program that we set up for ourselves, and it seems to work.
Wow. So as you're actually getting ready to go into this race, were there any days where you just mentally didn't want to train? I know you're building up to 33 hours in a week.
Yeah, there are. I mean, I would be lying if I told you that I'm no different than every other athlete that lines up, whether you're a pro or you're a first timer. I mean, we all have our lives and we all get tired. We all get burnt out. I know I do. I got tired. I got burnt out. Sometimes I got sad and lonely, and sometimes I just didn't want to do it. Sometimes I was fatigued. But I would often tell myself, you know, look, there's got to be, you know, I mean, the simple thing that I would say is, look, if you quit now, you'll be a quitter for the rest of your life. All those cliches that we've learned as kids through coaches, or whether it was a football coach or a track coach. And I kept telling myself those things. And I would often tell myself, you know, it's easy to it's easy to train hard and to want to work when you feel great. The mark of a champion is somebody that gets up when they're fatigued and really, really tired and doesn't want to do it. So get up and do it. And I did. It's very rare that I missed a workout. I think I might have missed maybe 3 workouts. And it was either because I was really, really sick or there was a death in the family or something like that. I think, I've had many people ask me, how do you get to the finish line? And I've never done anything super spectacular other than finish 3 Ironmans. But I will say that the easiest advice I would give people who are first timers or who want to do something hard is to not miss workouts. You can't miss workouts. If you miss workouts, you can never make up a missed workout. You might do another workout tomorrow, or you might do 2 workouts in the next day or something, but you can never make up a missed workout. So I never missed workouts, especially swim workouts. You just don't miss. And so, yeah, I'd get tired, brother, to be truthful with you, Terry. I'd get tired, and sometimes I just didn't feel like doing it. But I did. I would go and get the work done. It may not be pretty, but I would get the work done.
Wow. So when did you actually want to start getting your logistics nailed down for this race? So I'll preface that with, I know it's in Cozumel. I know that you're going to have to fly there. I know you have to get your bike there from Texas. And all of your other stuff for this bike and triathlon as well. I mean, your goggles, your bike, all of your bike stuff, all your run stuff, and all your extra stuff just for day to day. When did you want to start looking at your hotel or Airbnb, your flights, your rental car? When did you want to start looking at all this?
Yeah, so I as soon as I signed up, I finished Chattanooga, and then probably within 3 months, I signed up for Cozumel, and literally the day that I signed up for Cozumel is when I decided to book the hotels and to make my arrangement for flights. And the reason I did that was because, for those people aware, Cozumel is very unique in terms of the way that the race is physically set up. Most races, long course races, T1 and T2, that's transition 1 and transition 2, when you go from swim to bike and bike to run, transition area is all in one spot. In Cozumel, it's different.
Right.
Cozumel, the transition from from swim to bike is in one spot. And then the transition from bike to run is in another spot. And so what I wanted to do, I was thinking a little bit ahead and thought, well, most people are going to want to try to get a hotel that's in the middle of those 2 transition areas so that they have kind of equidistance to be able to walk between both, so they can see their athlete, race, come out of the water or whatever. And so I think my instincts were right, because the hotel that we ended up staying at was the El Presidente, and there was a lot of people that were there that were triathletes and or spectators, and it filled up pretty quickly. And then, as I understand the flights, the way it works there, I think there's really, and I could be wrong about this, but I only recognized 2 airlines that flew in and out of Cozumel directly. That was Delta and American Airlines. And I didn't want to fly. I wasn't super interested in bringing all of my gear to Cancun and then getting on a ferry and then ferrying from Cancun to Cozumel. So I flew into Cozumel, which I found to be a lot less cumbersome and a lot more convenient. So I made those reservations real early on as well, because I figured that flight was going to fill up, and it did. Wow. It did. So that's what I did. I think it's well worth a little bit extra money. The comfort of flying directly into Cozumel with your machine and with all your gear is more beneficial than, to me, flying to Cancun and getting on a ferry. And as I understand it, this year, Terry, the ocean was angry, and a lot of people that flew into Cancun got sick coming into Cozumel on the ferry, which is about a 30 to 45 minute ferry ride. And I couldn't imagine, a couple of days before your big A race, being sick at your stomach. You already have butterflies. You already have a lot going on in your head. You got enough problems going with, getting prepared for lining up, and to couple that with getting on a ship and getting seasick is not something that I think would be too cool.
Right. So whenever you actually got all of your logistics done, you wanted to stay closer to the swim start, or did you want to stay closer to the finish line?
No. So what I wanted to do was kind of stay in the middle. So I wanted to stay in the middle of where the swim would end, and where the bike would end. And so that way, when people saw me get out of the swim, they could kind of go back to the hotel, fresh, whatever, get themselves squared away, and then walk to where the bike would end. And it was kind of in the halfway point. And that hotel, El Presidente, is probably, if I had to guess, maybe, I don't know, 500 meters, 1,000 meters from where the swim start is anyway. But that's another thing in and of itself. It was hard for me to tell because I was an athlete and I couldn't really tell what was going on around too much. But it looked like to me, Terry, that the swim start was kind of limited maybe to VIPs, and spectators weren't necessarily allowed to go down there as they would otherwise be at other Ironman events. You couldn't just go down there and watch your athlete start. So a lot of people were going actually to where the swim would end, which is down the road a ways, a pretty good clip, maybe 2 miles, 3 miles. They would go down to where the swim would end and watch their athlete come out. And that's a real cool park where the swim ends. I think it's called Chacanaba. And that's where you can swim with dolphins and pretty neat area. And people would watch their athletes come out there. And then they would start on their bike there and then get from their bike all the way to where the race would ultimately end, where the marathon would start.
Right. So when did you actually want to start traveling from Texas over to Cozumel?
When did I travel there?
Yes.
Yeah. So I left on Thursday. The race was on Sunday. I left on Thursday, got there Thursday with an eye towards trying to do a swim on Thursday. But the problem is, I wasn't joking when I said the oceans were angry. The ocean, the swell and the waves were really bad when we got there, and the wind. I think the wind was over 20 miles an hour. The swells were really aggressive. The current was really aggressive. So it was red flag days on Thursday and Friday. And then on Saturday, when the practice swim was supposed to happen, they actually canceled the practice swim, and were contemplating actually canceling the entire swim for the Ironman event because the ocean was so bad. So I didn't really have a chance to get into the ocean until the swim start. But to be honest with you, was kind of bothersome. You know, I can get out of the water. I've demonstrated an ability to get out of the water in about an hour 4, between 58 minutes and an hour 4, for the full 3,800. But this swim, to be honest, and to be fair, was brutal for me. It just became really difficult on the right-sided breather. The waves are coming in from the right. They were coming in on perfect cadence. So I was swallowing a lot of water, and that was very, very difficult, a difficult swim for me, extraordinarily difficult. So anyway, to answer your question, I got there on Thursday. I wanted to do a swim. I couldn't. So I did a little shakeout run Thursday afternoon. I did a shakeout bike ride on Friday. And on Saturday, in lieu of the swim, I did another little run and kind of just got off my feet and got in my Normatex and tried to stay off my feet the rest of the day. Okay.
So did y'all have to get a rental car?
No, we didn't get a rental car. So the island's not real big and the airport's not too far away. We got picked up by a little shuttle van, and we took the shuttle van to the hotel, bikes and everything, and checked into the hotel. And everything is sort of within taxi distance. The hotels and the local taxi community go through great pains to try and, get you around, make you mobile if you need to be. And bike check-in, athlete check-in is at downtown. So you can catch a cab, and I want to say it costs like $7 or so. And you just catch a cab downtown to do your athlete check-in there at the convention center and catch a cab back. Not very expensive.
Did you worry about the exchange of currency?
Yeah. So I went there without cash. I actually used a local ATM there and just got pesos out because I thought it was easier to do payments with pesos than it would be to try to do the math in my head of the exchange to make sure that I wasn't being taken advantage of due to my ignorance. So I just got pesos that were there and pretty much was able to pay pesos with everything I was doing. And to be honest with you, I didn't really, all I did was got pesos out and gave them to my race manager, and he took care of everything. Wherever I would go, he would pay for me.
Oh, wow. So your race manager came with you down there.
Yeah. He goes to all my races with me. And kind of, shouts different instructions on if I'm doing something right or wrong, and reminds me to do different things if he sees me on the course, and kind of just shouts motivation things to kind of keep me going and reminds me of why I'm there.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. I didn't realize that he went too.
Yeah, Rick Reyna has gone to all my races, and yeah, spends an awful lot of energy and an awful lot of time just trying to help keep me right between my ears.
Wow. So the days before the race, you have to go to athlete check-in and all that. You've been to athlete check-in before. How was this here?
Yeah, so athlete check-in here is a little bit different. I got the sense that IRONMAN Cozumel, which is an Ironman event, is a little bit different. It's an Ironman branded event, but it's different in terms of the way they put it on. For example, you don't even need to have a USA Triathlon racing license to race Ironman Cozumel. As I understand it, you just have to have a Mexican license, and you have to pay for your Mexican license there at check-in, which is kind of unique. It's $10, and you get a Mexico racing license that they give you on the spot. And then the bags, for example, are different than every other Ironman bag that I've ever used. They're a little bit smaller. They're a little bit different. And the expo that we all like to take advantage of sometimes to get swag and Ironman stuff, souvenirs that you can give to family or friends, is a little bit smaller, actually a lot smaller. It's just different. It's still cool, but it's not what I was accustomed to here stateside.
Wow. So whenever you actually got to the check-in process, how was the check-in process for you?
So when I got there, we had just finished doing a shakeout ride. So our friends were there, and Rick was there. And so they were waiting for us to take care of our bikes while we went inside. It was myself, Harold, and Nicole Stockberger, another athlete from Big Sexy Racing for whom I race. So we all went inside together and kind of you're first required to go find your number, your race number or your bib number on a wall. It's a little bit different than some of the other races I've done where you're emailed or you're given information beforehand as to what your race number is going to be. Here in Ironman Cozumel, you don't find that out till the day of the race, till the day of check-in. So you go to a wall, and it's almost like road racing. You go up to the wall, you look at your category, you find your age group, and you find your race number there. Then you walk to a table, you tell a little lady, hey, this is my race number, and you sign a waiver as is typical, and then you go in with your race number and do all the athlete check-in stuff where they give you your timing chip, they give you your race packet and all that with your bags, and then you kind of just go through the little Ironman Expo Center where you can find different shirts and that kind of thing, and then you leave and go about your business.
Wow. So as you're going through all this fun stuff, the day after this, you're actually going to check your bike in and that. What is the process like to check your bike in here?
So checking your bike in is a little bit different than the other Ironman events I've done. Here they do it by your race number. So I was athlete number 516. And so they have a certain time slot based on your number. So it could be, numbers 501 through 530. You have from 12 o'clock till 12:30 to check your bike in. And so the difficulty, again, because you have to check in at a different area than where you're going to check in for the run. You got to find your way to the bike start, which is in Chacanaba, and you got to kind of either catch a cab, unless you want to walk there, which is not really smart because it's the day before the race. So you want to be off your feet as best you can. So I had my manager set me up a van to take us there. And you just stand in line, you do your bike check in there, and you drop your bike bag off there. And then after that, you've got to find your way from that spot to the other bike finish spot, which is down by the convention center downtown. And that's where you have to check in your run gear, your run bag. So it's two totally different spots. You got to be real cognizant of your time frame because in both instances, you have certain times that you're allowed to make that happen. And if you miss those times, then you don't have any access to you don't have access to the bike bag drop in the morning time, the morning of the race. So if you don't get it done the day of your check-in, then you're pretty well screwed. So you want to be really, really smart with reading the race packet, the athlete's guide, to make sure that you make those time frames. It's really critical that you do that because if you don't, then your race will be done before it's even started.
Okay, so let me just make sure I heard you right here. The bike drop is at one location. The run drop is at another location, obviously, because of two separate transitions. But you also have to put your bike bag in there the day before the race, and you don't have access to that the day before either, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. In fact, I have a friend that I noticed that his bike bag wasn't there during the time frame that he was allotted to try and do his bike bag drop at the time of bike check-in. So I quickly emailed him or texted him there on the spot from Transition and said, "Hey, boss, I'm here. I don't see your bag. Did someone take your bag?" And he said, "No, I'm just going to put it there in the morning." And I said, "Hey, brother, don't waste your time reading the athlete guide. I'm telling you, you got to get it done today because you won't have access in the morning. Haul butt down here and get it done." So he quickly got on a bus and got it down there. And sure enough, the next morning, there were several athletes that were trying to make their way into the bike bag area to drop stuff off or to get stuff out. And they told him point blank, that is not going to happen. You're not allowed to.
Wow. I wonder why.
I don't know. I didn't get into the details, as hectic as it is race morning. I didn't want to, stand around to kind of, interview anyone else to figure out why. All I know is I was curious to see if they would really enforce that rule, and they did. So that's one thing that I wanted to take away in terms of logistics and intelligence. If in case I ever go back to do that race again, don't forget, to make sure that you get your stuff dropped off the day before as you're required to, because they don't allow you to have access the morning of.
Wow. So from a day-to-day nutrition aspect, what are you getting in food-wise the day before the race?
Yeah, so I really try to focus on my macros. Coach Wilson, Harold and Chris McDonald and I and Scott Burrow have talked. I found a macro ratio that works really well for me, given my age and my and how my body sort of metabolizes food. And so I try to focus on eating every 3 hours the day before a race, just small little meals on a 30-20-10 plan. So I'll take 30 grams of good clean carbohydrates, 20 grams of protein, and 10 grams of good clean fat, just so my body feels like it's a full, normal meal that's a well-balanced meal. And then I try to supplement with salt and Pedialyte, as throughout the entire day. I'm a huge fan of Pedialyte.
Oh, wow. So as far as your breakfast, lunch, and dinner goes, what did you have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner the day before the race?
So for breakfast, I had the morning before the race. I had oatmeal. I had raisins. I had one piece of bread, which I don't typically eat, but I wanted to absorb any excess acid that may be in my stomach from nerves or whatever. And I had water, and I had 1 full quart of Pedialyte.
Okay. And then what did you have for a snack or lunch?
You mean during the race?
No. The day before the race.
Oh, got it. The day before. I had some fruit that wasn't super duper rich in fiber. So I think I might have had maybe some oranges, some bananas, and I try to stay away from like strawberries, melons, things like that. And then I had some eggs. I had some oatmeal, and I had some Mexican sweetbread as a snack. And then I had some more Pedialyte and water. Okay.
And for lunch the day before the race?
For lunch, I think I had lunch. I probably had a piece of salmon. I think I had some. I remember having some broccoli and a half of a sweet potato, and then some soup. I had soup that was real rich in salt and chicken.
Wow! And what did you have for dinner?
For dinner, I had soup with chicken, and I had some tortillas that were in that soup, and then that's pretty much it. I just had kind of a light dinner so that I could try to sleep a little bit well.
Okay, so I know whenever a lot of people travel abroad, especially to the Central American countries, they don't want to eat some of the fruits, or maybe they want to stay away from the poultry or the eggs or even some of the fish because of it might not be cooked as well, or it might not have the right quality here. Did you notice this was an issue for you?
Yeah, no, I didn't. So, and that's a really good, that's a real observant reality, because that's true. I was super duper worried about that. And so what I did was I made sort of establish a relationship or rapport with my waiter and let him know, how important this race was to me and how I wanted my food prepared very carefully, please. And I was very respectful. And of course, my race manager, Rick, took care of him when it came time to tips and stuff. And so it helped a little bit take that out. And I was somewhat of a creature of habit with what it was that I was eating. I would try to eat sort of the same things or the same family of things with an eye towards trying to minimize anything spicy or anything that might upset my stomach. And I had that luxury because of the hotel I stayed in. I didn't venture out and have meals in different places. I didn't go out in town to try and explore. I just did the same thing with an eye towards recognizing I was there for a purpose. If I was there, just enjoying a vacation or whatever, then I would be willing to take that risk. But I was there for a purpose. And so I dispensed with any of the luxuries of trying different things. I only drank bottled water. The day we got there, my race manager and my wife went to the store and bought 4 gallons of bottled water. And that I only drank bottled water and or Perrier just to make sure that I didn't kind of get any type of an illness. And then the fruit that I ate was typically fruit that I felt comfortable, looked good, didn't smell bad, and was not something exotic. So that kind of helped a lot.
Wow. So the day before the race, what time are you trying to get in bed?
I usually go to bed around 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And the day before this race, I held true. I went to bed at 8 o'clock.
Okay. So before you actually get in bed, are you talking with Harold about a race plan of how you want to execute this race?
Yeah. So I've never raced with Harold and not had an actual written out race plan. So my race plan is reduced to the ridiculous in terms of the swim, the bike, and the run. My forte in this sport is the bike, and the weakest link for me is the swim. And so my bike is where I feel like I can earn a lot of rewards. And so I literally type out my bike plan, my wattage plan on my machine, and I seal it in a plastic coating, and I put it on my top tube. So I'm constantly able to refer back to my race plan when I get deep into the race and start thinking, kind of losing myself in terms of my awareness of what's going on or just being fatigued. I can have something to refer back to that's tactile. I can look at and say, okay, don't forget, this is how many watts you need to be pushing. And, this is what happens when the wind changes direction or when you're in a headwind. I have all the information that I need there from Harold Wilson, my coach. And I rely very heavily on that. And that gives me enough efficiency to be able to make the transition from the bike to the run.
So what was in your race plan for Cozumel?
Well, my plan was to try and stay between a certain wattage. It was 180 to 200 watts. And it was a certain number that I'm going to keep that to myself. But my goal was to try and honor that race plan. And I had different variations depending on where the wind was coming from. And that was really critical because anyone who's ever raced Cozumel or who's looking to race Cozumel should know that on the backside of the bike, it's a 3-loop bike course. On the backside of the bike is super duper windy. The coastal winds are very aggressive, and they work really, really hard to your disadvantage. So it was really important and incumbent on me to rely on that race plan to overcome that sort of obstacle of the headwinds. And then, of course, on the other side, on the soft side, you get a really, really strong tailwind, which helps you a lot.
Right. And being that you've done Chattanooga, you already know that hills are different than flat courses.
Yeah.
And not to get too off track, but quickly, if you could compare the toughness of doing a flat course like Cozumel with the wind and then compare that to Chattanooga where there's hills, which would you say is easier?
Well, for me, I want to be perfectly honest to anyone who listens to this. I mean, I got out of the water in 2 hours and 15 minutes. I barely stayed in this race because of the difficulty I had in the water, and for different reasons, that are maybe not as important to this question as would some would think. But I was really tired when I got on the machine, and so my bike in Cozumel is not at all indicative of my skill set on the machine. I'm capable of putting a 520 down on 100. Chattanooga is indeed very hilly and quite frankly a beautiful course. I expected to do far better in Cozumel than I did in Chattanooga because it's flat. In reality, however, Chattanooga for me proved to be a lot easier. I had an easy go at the bike in Chattanooga, despite the hill. Like about Chattanooga was the pavement. All of us that do this game and race bikes love clean, soft pavement. The pavement in Chattanooga wasn't always that great. The pavement in Cozumel is pretty damn good, except for a few spots in town when you get through the city. So to me, the bike course in Cozumel was a lot more difficult just because I got out of the water so late and the winds had picked up so aggressively by the time I got on the machine.
Gotcha.
That's the reality of things.
Okay. Well, we'll get into all of that fun stuff. I just wanted to ask that before we get too deep into the weeds here of the actual race. So whenever you actually got up on race morning, what time are you waking up, and what is your race day morning ritual like before you actually leave your hotel room here?
So I got up at 4:00 and I always eat the same thing on race morning that I eat when I train. It doesn't make sense to always eat the same thing when you train and then go out there and do something exotic on the race morning that could screw your stomach up. You know, there's a very simple rule: never do anything for the first time on race day. And I believe that. I think our bodies are kind of like computers, and they memorize everything that we do. And if your body gets accustomed to eating the same number of calories, the same type of thing that you train with, well, why would you want to deviate from that on race morning? So I got up at 4:00, myself mentally, a shower, I shaved my legs, kind of got things where I feel comfortable. And then I went down and ate the same thing that I always eat. I ate some oatmeal with raisins, a piece of bread, some Pedialyte, and a bunch of water, and a banana. And then I kind of went back to my room, collected my thoughts, said some prayers, got my bike together. Got my stuff together and went down to, in Cozumel, you have to take your special needs, bike special needs and run special needs and drop them off the morning of. So I took that stuff with me. My race manager and I got on the bus and went down to the swim start.
Wow. So what are you having for breakfast actually?
I had oatmeal. I had raisins. I had a banana. I had a piece of bread. I had a quart of Pedialyte and some water.
Okay, so I'm just ballparking that about 500 calories?
Yeah, I think it's about 500 calories.
Okay. So as you're actually heading over to the swim start, how is your nerves and anxiety at this point?
Yeah, so I was nervous, Terry, on this race because I didn't get a chance to get in the body of water. You know, 5 minutes or 50 minutes, I think it's important to be able to get in the water that you're going to race in at least once before the race starts. And I'd never been in this water before, you know, and the Riviera Maya is what you're swimming in. Make no mistake about it. It's a tough body of water. I find it somewhat ironic that it's voted the best. I was talking to Chris McDonald about it afterwards, telling him about how difficult it was. And he was like, man, every time I've ever raced that, it's calm. There's a good current. It's just a great body. And I was like, man, that's just totally diametrically opposite of what I experienced. So I was a little nervous about not being able to get in the water before I started this. But other than that, I was okay. I'd been there before. That is, I've been to, the start line before. I've done Ironman before. I knew I had a race plan. I had a lot of training under my belt. I was physically prepared. I didn't have any pains or dings or nicks on my body that were causing me to be worried. I was ready to line up and put a good race together.
Wow. So as you're making your way to transition, what are you doing in transition to prepare you for this race? I know you're obviously going to put some PSI in your wheels at 100 and 110 PSI. Yep. What else are you doing?
Yeah, so one of the things I think that's critical, knowing the environment there in Cozumel, how drastic the weather changed. In the evening time, it was really cool. And in the morning, it was cool, but then it was quickly start to heat up. There's thermals that are associated with being on an island. I didn't want to risk any problems with tires. And I see this so often with both novices and, elite athletes who just forget to do it. They don't take air out of their tires the night before. And so there's tires that are popping and blowing up the morning of the race. I have enough knowledge and situational awareness to remember that, having seen that many times. So I took the air out of my tires the night before, not completely, but just a lot of it, so that it allows for expansion based on the and the pressures and the thermals that exist. And the morning I got there, like you said, I went and loaded up my front tire to 100 PSI and my rear tire to 110. And then made sure my bike was situated the way I wanted it to. I'm not the kind of guy that, tattoos a bunch of, goos and gels and tapes them all over my top tube and all that. But I just made sure the box on my shiv was adequately stuffed with what it is that I needed in terms of calories. And then I made sure my bottles were nice and full. I took my water the morning of and put my bottles on and got everything filled on the machine. And then made sure everything was spinning okay. I made sure that I was in the proper gear so that when I get out of transition, I'm not having to, get on my machine and then switch gears because I'm in too big of a gear. And that's it. I got situated and was ready to go. So then I got my race manager and we hopped on the bus and then took the bus from bike start to swim start, wow. Which is in a different spot.
Right. And it's too far to walk.
Yeah, it's definitely too far to walk. Yeah. It's over 2.4 miles for sure. Right. So if I had to guess, it's like 2.7 miles maybe.
Right. So with this morning, did y'all have to worry about how much of a time commitment it would take to get a bus over to transition and then get a bus back over to the swim start? Where was your family at? What was all this logistically? Was this like?
Yes, that's true. So it became abundantly clear because the swim start appears to be on like a military base. I knew, Terry, that it wouldn't make sense for my manager and my family to sit there and watch me start something and then have to walk 2.4 miles to the bike start to see me finish. Because the truth is, when I started this race, I expected to get out of the water in like 56 minutes or so, in less than an hour. And I figured there's no way that they could walk that distance in 56 minutes because there was just a mass of humanity that was there. So what I told them to do was, hey, don't worry about watching me start. Just go to the swim finish where the bike starts. Sit there and watch me get out of the water at about an hour, and you'll get to see me start the bike. And so that's where they went. Rather than go watch me start the swim, they went to the bike start, the swim finish, and transition there and waited for me to come out of the water. And unfortunately, my swim went terribly wrong. And so when I got out of the water, if I wasn't the last, I was damn near one of the last. They had no problems locating me when I got out of the water because I was one of the only ones.
Right. But we'll get there too. So whenever you actually got over to the swim start, before you get there, just something that I thought of. This is in Cozumel, Mexico.
Yes.
What cell phone carrier do you have?
I have Verizon.
Okay. So how did cell phone service work there? Did you ever get into the plan?
Yeah, no. So what you do, and it's a really good question for anybody that's thinking about doing international races, you just contact your carrier and tell them, hey, I'm going to go here from this date to this date. Is there a plan I can buy? Can I pay a little extra money or whatever so that I can utilize cell service, text service, data service while I'm there? Well, Verizon, I must have had some kind of plan that it was okay. I communicated with them. They said, nope, you're good to go. You can use it just like you would here in America. And so it worked just like I was here home in Texas.
Oh, so you didn't have to worry about not using it or airplane mode or whatever?
Nope, I was good to go. I had data. I could text. I could Facebook. I could reach out to people that were interested in following me, and it was just like I was here at home. I did utilize Wi-Fi when I was in the hotel and Wi-Fi wherever I could, just so I could minimize the data usage or whatever, and it worked great.
So how was the coverage there? Was it okay?
Yeah, I had perfect coverage. I never had a problem with coverage ever.
Okay. I know it was random, but okay. So as we're getting to the swim start, are you meeting up with Harold, and is he giving you a last little bit of tips before you get underway?
Yeah, so Harold and I met with another fantastic athlete named Laura, who's just amazing. She doesn't race for Big Sexy Racing, but she races I think she races now out of Boulder, Colorado. She's originally from Dallas. We all met up in bike transition, and we kind of just hung out for a minute and tried to have a little loose conversation so we didn't build up any nerves. And then we had to walk our way to the buses that were taking us to swim start. And that's when Harold and I had some final discussions about, believing in each other and, just, the icing on the cake and the haze in the barn and all these things that we've both demonstrated an ability to be able to put, a good race together. And this was our time. And at that point, there's really no discussion that happened that was real heavy, Terry, that, talked about anything about numbers or anything like that. It was just about being friends at that point and just kind of having each other's back and being able to be thankful for the ability to be above ground and honoring the goodness that God gave us in terms of athleticism and just an ability to line up together. We were just so happy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So as you're getting ready to get into the water, it's obviously 80 plus degrees here, so you're not wearing a wetsuit. How are you preparing mentally for this 2.4 mile swim?
So I seated myself in the 110 to 120. I think it was 110 to 120 corral. And the only reason I did that was because like I said, I expected to get out of the water a little less than an hour. I wanted to spend a little bit of time in the water, kind of trying to find a rhythm because I hadn't had a chance to get in the water before. And I wanted to find myself in terms of cadence, my swim cadence. I wanted to find where my cadence compared to the waves, because you could definitely see that waves were coming in and the swell was pretty serious in my book, my opinion. And so I corralled myself up in a little bit slower corral with an eye towards trying to find a rhythm. And then once I speeding things up a little bit. And so I did. I just kind of chilled out there. I took a little bit of last minute Pedialyte, and I took 2 bunk breaker energy chews and just let one of them kind of almost like I dipped it. I put it underneath my tongue to kind of let it dissolve under my tongue to kind of give me a little bit longer release. And then that was it. We started a rolling start, 2x2s. You jump in the water. A mistake that a lot of people made was think the water was deep when they jump off the pier. The water is not deep. It's quite shallow. And in fact, I saw more than one athlete before me jump in and actually get injured jumping in the water, their feet, because it was so shallow.
Wow. So what happened to them? Did they almost break their ankle?
I saw one guy, I don't know if he broke his ankle, clearly did something bad to his foot, really bad, because they pulled him out and his race ended before it even started. And then the other one was a lady that just, it was a female. She jumped in and to say, "Oh my God, it's shallow, ow," or something like that. She just started swimming. So I only saw one guy get pulled out.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
To see somebody's race literally end seconds after it started.
Yeah, but again, I think it's important in that environment. Again, when you haven't had a chance to get in the water, whether it was me or anybody else, that was valuable intelligence at that moment. If you have situational awareness to keep you prepared, okay, memo to self, it's clearly shallow there. When you jump in, be careful. And despite that, I saw people that were, it was obvious that happened. I saw people that were either just not paying attention or so focused that were actually trying to dive in head first, which is, I think, a bonehead move, but people were doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you get into the swim. How does the first few hundred meters of the swim go for you?
So the first few hundred meters was okay. It was no problem. There was nothing to it. And I think it's in large part because it was so close to the pier that you kind of jumped in. I don't know if that had some effect on blocking the waves. There was also a lot of big boats that were right there in the first couple of hundred meters that I think blocked the waves that were coming from my right to my left. And so it wasn't so bad. And in the first 100 meters, I was, kind of just chilling out, no problems. There wasn't anything that caused me any measure of stress where I would need to hang on or need any assistance. So there was no problems.
Okay. So after the first few hundred meters, then you move on to the middle portion, say 500 to say 3K in. How are you feeling? When did you realize that this was not going to be the swim you wanted it to be?
Yeah. So what happened was I was having a problem finding a rhythm that matched, that didn't match almost equally the waves. And I don't know how to explain it. I'm not that technical of a swimmer. So all I can say is it seemed like every time I would try to breathe, I'm a right-sided breather. Every time I would try to breathe to the right, I would capture a lot of water. And so I tried to speed my cadence up a little bit and same to slow it down. It just seemed like I couldn't get ahead of the waves. And so, at that point, other athletes are coming behind and all around you that are having apparently no problems. And, there's a lot of splashing, and I'm not a kind of guy that would panic in the water, but at about 800 meters, it became apparent to me that I was really spending a lot of energy and a lot of mental focus trying to find myself a balance and a happy swim cadence. And I couldn't. So at that moment, I decided, hey man, this is a time to just utilize a kayak, just hang on for 1 minute, collect your thoughts, look around you, find some clean water, try to figure out where it is that you can count these waves and start swimming again. The problem was at that time, Terry, is I couldn't find a kayak anywhere.
Really?
And the reason I couldn't find a kayak, and I don't want to be critical of Ironman or IRONMAN Cozumel, because there probably were kayaks there. I just couldn't see them because the swells and the waves were coming up. And maybe it was just the timing of when I was coming out of the water trying to find them. Maybe they were behind a wave or whatever. But I literally could not find a kayak. I couldn't find anything to kind of help me hang on. And the water's deep. So I sort of at that moment decided, okay, let me just roll over, do a survival stroke on my back, try to catch some air. I rolled over, and the reality was every time I tried to my breath, the waves were just crashing in your mouth, and I was just swallowing tons of water. So at that moment, I just became desperate. It's the sensation of drowning without drowning, and you just become desperate. And so the last thing you want to do, or the last thing I wanted to do, was wave my hand in desperation, because then your day's done at 800 meters. And I just, to be honest with you, Terry, I prayed. I said, God, please just, you help me get out of this water, get me on dry land, and I'll finish this race. It may not be pretty, but I'll finish this race by your grace. Just help me get out of this water. And at that moment, I saw a kayak. And so I swam as hard as I could to the kayak, grabbed onto the kayak, tried to collect my thoughts. And by that moment, time is just going by. Time is going by. The panic had caused me a lot of energy, spendage. And I just swam. And the rest of it, quite frankly, was sort of a haze, a combination of the waves getting worse, the jellyfish, and just things that just didn't go well like I expected, and just feeling somewhat defeated, and ended up being a 2 hour and 15 swim, which should have been an hour most.
Right. So at what point did you realize that, okay, my wife, race manager, and all of them, they're going to be wondering what's going on?
Yeah.
Because this had to be a thought, right?
Yeah. And it did. And, the last thing we want to do as an athlete is to cause fear to those loved ones that are there cheering for us or waiting for us. And, it's scary for them who've never done Ironman before, who've never swam in a big body of water before. The concept of getting out in big, deep water like that is scary for them enough without having to multiply that by the fear of why hasn't he come in? And I told them, and they expected me, indeed have seen me come out of the water in an hour. When an hour went by, I'm sure they were frightened. When an hour 30 went by, when 145, when 2 hours, I know they were deathly afraid, because when I did get out of the water, my daughter was there. In fact, I think there may be a picture of it on Facebook or Instagram. My daughter was there crying, afraid that something had happened to me, which, to be honest with you, was one of the difficulties of this race, because I love my family so much, as we all do. And the last thing I wanted to do was for them to be scared for me. But they also, I'm cut from a cloth that is somewhat common, a thread that we find common in long course sport. That is that, I don't quit. And it might have sucked, and it did, but I don't quit. That I hoped for, that I prayed for, but I don't quit. If I'm going to be dragged out of the water, it's going to be because somebody's trying to save my life, but I don't quit. That's just not in my DNA. And so that's what happened.
Wow. So as you're getting closer to the end of the swim, you realize that this is taking you a lot longer. Did you have a watch on?
I did. I had my watch on. I knew that I had 5 minutes to spare. And at that moment, as weird as this sounds, I knew I was going to get out of the water in time. I made a decision. Erica McDonald, which is Chris McDonald's wife, and my wife, her name is Kelly. They have this saying that I think is really cute, and I'll probably mess it up, but it's something like, always turn lemons into lemonade when you can, because you never know when it's your last chance to do it. And so I decided at that moment, when I got out of the water, that I was going to finish the race. There was nothing that was going to stop me from finishing the race, but that I was going to make the race not a fun race, because there was nothing fun about it, Terry, but I was going to make it a race to remember. I wanted to shake people's hands and slap people's hands and give high fives and, tell little kids thank you and be a different athlete than I typically am, because I'm so in the zone trying to qualify. And that's what I did. I did the best I could to be aware of what was going on around me, to be thankful for the goodness that is Ironman and for the blessings that God has given me, whether you believe in God or not, whoever it is that gives you the ability to compete. I was just thankful for the opportunity to be there when so many other people can't.
Wow. So as you're making your way to T1, you're in T1 about 10 minutes here. How does T1 go for you?
T1 was great. I had no problems. I really focus on doing what it is that Rick tells me to do in terms of preparing my bag. He's real diligent about reading the athlete guide and knowing the rules. And I am too, in terms of like the race part of it, but the setting up part, I rely really heavily on him. So I got my bag situated. I had everything that I needed in terms of nutrition. I focus real heavily on the time that I'm transitioning from the swim to the bike, on getting in even as early as while I'm putting my shoes on. Your clothes, a machine when you're many watch outs that I was expecting to put out is really important. So I don't waste any time. As soon as I get out of the water and get my bag, I start consuming calories, and it's liquid calories and Pedialyte. It's also important to get on the front end of being hydrated. So I do Pedialyte and I do a full bottle of my nutrition. And then I start to eat something a little bit salty just to try and take some of the edge off. And thankfully that worked well here, because I drank so much damn seawater. So I eat pretzels and I eat a full packet of mustard just to give my body some salt, a unique taste and something tangible in my stomach that can kind of absorb anything that might be funky in my stomach. And then I get on my machine and I start racing.
Wow. So when did you know to adjust your plan for this race?
You mean adjust my plan for the bike part of the race?
Yes, because knowing that you had a lot longer swim, more than an hour longer swim than you had anticipated, when did you know to say, okay, well, I might have to adjust my bike plan because my swim took a lot more energy out of me?
Yeah. So, I knew that it was a three loop course. And so what I made a decision when I was coming out of the water and actually running, kind of a long run from the water exit, the swim exit to the bike transition. I knew at that moment how important it was. I leave just enough extra nutrition in my bike bag to where I take what I want and I can leave some extra and not have to worry about it. But in that instant, when I got out of the water, I knew I'd spent so much energy in that water, both emotionally and physically, that I needed to kind of replenish what I'd lost. So I decided that no matter if it took me an extra minute or so, I was going to eat everything in that bag and consume the entire bottle of Pedialyte, because I knew I expended so much energy and had to have some measure of dehydration because of because of the water and because of the water that I had intaken. And that ended up helping me a lot. I didn't have issues with cramping on the bike because of that. So I guess at that moment, Terry, when I got out of the water is when I made a decision. Okay, that's done. It's behind you. Now you got to focus on what's ahead of you. And that's when I did.
Okay. So you've already mentioned the road quality was really good. Whenever you started getting to the aid stations, how were the aid stations? Did you have enough time to get what you needed from the aid stations, discard what you didn't, and move on?
Yeah. So the aid stations, I think, were fantastic. In my opinion, they're among the best that I've ever seen. I think the people there, the little children that are there and the volunteers doing a great job to really be engaged and to help. And I thought, what they handed up, typical of most Ironman events, they give you Pepsi, they gave you Gatorade, they give you oranges, pretzels, the typical. One thing that they did also give here that I kind of part ways with in terms of logic, they gave it looked like it was either peanuts or cashews. I don't think rich, fatty things like that on a race are super duper smart. And I saw a lot of athletes taking peanuts and cashews, which I would strongly recommend against. Those are known to give stomach distress issues, and in a real bad way, even in small quantities. So I avoided that. And then the water, one of the things that if you're an athlete, you probably worry about, as I did, was, well, are they giving me water that comes from a local source, or what kind of water are they going to hand me up? Now, I made a mental note. In fact, the day before the race, my manager drove me around just so I could get good between my ears, knowing and having the confidence that it was good water. They bring out these gigantic jugs of pre-sealed Ozarka water, it looked like. And so all the water that they handed up was clean, good, solid water. And frankly, it tasted really, really good. So I had no problems with that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So as you're making your round on the first loop of this course, are you wanting to hit a certain cadence, speed, power? I know we talked a little bit about power, and we don't want to talk about the exact number that you were aiming for, but how was this feeling for you? Was this going good for you? How is everything going?
Yeah, so I don't really care too much about speed. Speed comes with it. Normally, if you really follow your coach's plan and you really follow the wattage output that they prescribe for you. So I was really focused on my power, and to be perfectly honest with you, no, my power wasn't there on the first loop. And I think the first loop, I was crestfallen, Terry. I was sad. I was heartbroken, and because this was my A race, and I really expected to do really well. And the swim was just so bad that I was crestfallen. And I was shaken a little bit, to be honest with you. I was a little rattled. So I had that sensation, that feeling that you feel when you're a little kid, when you get in trouble, that kind of hot feeling all over your body when you get busted doing something. A sensation that I was trying to just shake because I felt so bad about the swim. And so it wasn't really until, quite frankly, I saw my wife and I saw my daughter, my friend Jerry, my manager on the loop, that I started to feel I felt better on my second loop than I did on my first. My second loop, I stopped a couple of times because it was time to refuel. And I did that. I stopped in special needs so I could get some Pedialyte, because the winds had picking up. Although the temperature wasn't very hot, the sun was beating down, which made it hot, and the winds dry you off. So you didn't have the benefit of the sweat. And so I knew that I was kind of deep in the race, and I knew that I needed to have, some electrolyte replenishment. Otherwise I'd probably be dehydrated and suffer on the run. So I sacrificed some time by stopping in special needs, getting my Pedialyte down, pretzels in my body, eating my reward, which was a mustard packet and half of a Coke, and then getting on the bike again.
Whoa. You just said your reward was a mustard packet.
Yeah. I know it's silly, but I in bike racing, one of the tricks that I've used and a lot of bike racers use is mustard packets. I don't know what it is about them, but they really help sort of eliminate cramping. For me, they do. And so I've learned that to be kind of a reward. So I like pretzels a lot. I eat pretzels with a mustard packet and then a half a Coke, and kind of gets me where I need to be for the next loop on this race.
Okay. So mentally, as you pass special needs at what mile here?
I think I was probably there, maybe like mile 70 or so.
Okay.
78, maybe 8 miles, 70 to 80 or somewhere in there.
So how bad was the headwind or side wind here?
Man, to me, it was awful. To me, it was awful. I mean, I now know why it is that Cozumel bans discs, because, I had 80 millimeters on, and man, it was just blowing. If you weren't careful, for example, if you were trying to get nutrition at the wrong time and you weren't super careful and didn't have enough awareness, you could get blown around that road pretty easily. Now, thankfully, the whole road is closed off for athletes, which makes it really cool. Yeah, the wind was serious. It was pretty. If I had to guess, I'd say that I'd really be interested in looking at the meteorological report or the weather report, because the wind to me seemed like it was well north of 20 miles an hour easily.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for you, mentally, after the special needs from miles 70, 80, 90, and 100, you're battling this horrific wind. How are you holding up mentally and emotionally at this point, knowing that you're not going to be finishing in that 5 hour and 30 minute mark? You already had a terrible swim, and you're all by yourself.
Yeah. So I knew at that point, again, I had made, everything in life is about making choices, and whether it's at work or whether it's racing or whether it's a relationship. And so I made a choice when I got out of the water to sort of embrace the philosophy that Erica McDonald and my wife often espouse, that is, turn lemons into lemonade. And I knew that I wasn't going to have that great of a race. I knew it. There's no way in the world I was going to finish in the time that I'm capable of doing. So what I wanted to do was just, I sacrificed a lot of speed for just enjoying the scenery, looking around with an eye towards being cognizant of what I was going to need to finish on the run. And I left myself enough room where I knew I was going to be able to finish on the run. So mentally, in some kind of weird, twisted way, Terry, it was somewhat liberating that I was free of any time restrictions, and I wasn't chasing a clock like I would expected myself to do. I was just going to enjoy the Ironman race. And that's what I did.
So you literally just gave yourself some grace and said, hey, it is what it is. I'm going to make the best of it.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing, my manager, Rick, tells me that one of the things that he teaches his Boy Scouts, he's a Boy Scout leader as well, is that the one thing that I don't ever want to hear you complain about is the weather, because it's nothing we can do to control it. And, that sort of translated in my mind and resonated in this. I can't complain about the swim. It's God, God made the water the way he did, and other people did fantastic in the same environment that I didn't. I can't complain about the wind. It's, hey man, God or whoever it is made that wind the way it was. So it is what it is. There's nothing I could do about it. I could either grumble about it and spend crazy amounts of energy on the bike trying to chase a time that there's no way in the world was ever going to happen. Or I could, put a respectful bike run down, save enough energy to enjoy the run, to do the run as best I could and get the race done. And that's what I did.
Wow. So after you get to, say, miles 100, knowing that you've battled this wind for 100 miles, how are you feeling?
I don't feel too bad. I'm starting to feel tight on my IT bands. I don't feel cramped. I'm on top of my game in terms of nutrition and hydration. I don't feel like I'm suffering extraordinarily bad. I do feel tight. I can feel my IT bands are tight, and I can feel my low back is tight. It's just from being on the machine for so long and for spending so much energy on the swim. And so it wasn't until I actually got off the machine that I realized just how tight my IT bands really were. My knees were really, really suffering, which is kind of unusual when you're on the bike, unless you have IT band issues. And I didn't realize I really had them until I got off the machine and tried to run through transition, and my knees were really tender, really delicate.
Okay. So looking back on it, did you see a lot of flats, mechanicals, or wrecks on the bike?
I did see a couple of flats. I didn't see too many mechanicals. I did see quite a few people laying on the side of the road. And it could be that I was so far back in the race that maybe some of the people weren't that prepared maybe, or, sort of underestimated Cozumel or the race, the winds. I don't know, but I did see people kind of laying out on the side of the road, not in a bad way. Maybe they were just trying to take a breather or whatever, but I did see a couple people laying out on the side of the road.
Okay. So as far as the bike goes, is there anything you would tell someone to be aware of that hasn't done this bike course before?
No, just be leery. The bike course is beautiful. I think it's really cool to race on an island where you get to see the ocean. The views are spectacular. I might not have enjoyed those, which is kind of the silver lining of this race. I might not have had been afforded the opportunity to enjoy those if I was really in the money, Terry. If I was really in the money where I expected to be, I might not have had the pleasure of being able to look around me and see how beautiful things were, which is something that I thought was cool about this race. Is despite how bad it went, my performance was, I thought it was really cool getting able to see how beautiful everything was around me. In terms of warnings, when you get in town, it's a 3-loop course. There are a couple of turns that aren't that big a deal. They're well marked, but the road in town has a number of hazards. Virtue of being in town, there's some parts that are cobblestone. There's a lot of potholes in some areas. You really want to keep your head on a swivel when you're in town. because the road can be kind of nasty in town. And if you race the race, you'll know what I mean in town. You can't help it because it's only a certain section that's in town. All the rest of it is out on the end of the island where there's no real habitation. It's just basically like a jungle.
So where are these bad spots of the bike course at?
Like in town, like kind of around where the finish would be, around the central area, around, I guess it's probably where there's a couple of, I want to say it's, I can't remember the name of the restaurant, Terry, not restaurant, the grocery store, but it's called Mega. Around the Mega grocery store, around where the finish, around where the convention center would be, and that whole downtown area, you're having to make a number of turns before you get on a long straight. But in that area where you're having to make all the turns, there's some cobblestones, there's some potholes in the road. They're spray paint marked, but not super clearly. So you want to be really careful in that area because that's kind of a crappy area to end up having a flat because you hit a pothole or something like that.
Okay. So the last mile or two of the bike ride, are you doing anything to start preparing to start running? Yeah.
So what I do in the last mile or so is I'll consume a full packet of either bonk breakers or some energy chews. And I swallow water. I focus on the last transition area that I'm aware of to get one full bottle of water, because at that point, I'm kind of sick of the whole sweet, sugary thing, as most people may be. And so I just want some water. So I try to hydrate with that, knowing that when I get in transition, I have some more Pedialyte there. And I'm going to focus on the first 20 minutes of my run on getting hydration down. So I need some energy. So that's why I take my energy chews. I want to clear my mouth out, rinse my gut out a little bit. So that's why I drink water. And I know that I'm going to get my reward in a little bit, which is another mustard packet with some pretzels. And I'm going to swallow some Pedialyte.
There you go again, saying mustard is a reward.
Yeah, that mustard packet, man. That's my reward, man. Small but mighty, I think.
Man, I think you're the second person to say they've done the mustard packets.
Yeah.
So as you get to T2, you're in T2 for just over 7 minutes. How does T2 go for you?
Yeah, T2 wasn't that bad at that point. I wanted to make sure that I had everything sort of in line. And I was dealing with a little bit of an IT band issue on my left side. So a little bit of my time in transition was spent trying to stretch my left IT band a little bit and trying to urinate. I needed to take a whiz. I wanted to make sure that there was no bad discoloration in my urine, which is something that I think is not often spoke of, but I think is really critical for long course athletes, particularly people that are new to the game and don't understand how it works. You know, your body is a machine, and your body operates on fuel, and you can tell a lot, believe it or not, by your pee and your poop. Well, I don't really poop that much when I'm racing, but I do try to pee, and you can tell a lot by your urine and the coloration of your urine, the bubbles. That kind of thing is important to kind of read. And so I went into the Porto and read my urine, and I could tell by the coloration of my urine that I was starting to be pretty dehydrated, even though I didn't feel like I was. And so a lot of people feel like, well, the way I can measure my dehydration is by cramping. And once you get to where you're cramping, you're already beyond a reasonable measure of dehydration. And one of the first things you can read in terms of trying to defeat that is your urine. And so I looked at my urine and I could tell it was really, really dark, which lent itself to what's kind of typical in my race. That's one of the reasons why I rely so heavy on Pedialyte. And so I knew, based on prior races and on my coaching from Harold, that I needed to spend the first 20 minutes hydrating so I could get my urine discolored. And that's exactly what I did. I focused on my urine color. It was really dark. I knew that I needed to slam my full bottle of Pedialyte as opposed to maybe just half. And I needed to consume all the calories that I had. And I did that. And that's why it took me around 7 minutes to get to where I needed to be.
Wow. So as you're making your way out of T2 here, how is your mindset going into this run, knowing that you have to run a marathon?
I was tired. I was tired because now I'm a lot deeper into my race than I'm 2 hours deeper into my race than I normally would be. And so I knew that this wasn't going to be a super fast run. I was also dealing with issue on my left side. My knee and my IT band were super duper tight, which made my turnover a little less than I hoped for. I knew that I was battling with a little bit of dehydration because I'd been on course longer than I expected to be. And so I just decided, I made a mental note of the math in my mind as to what I needed to do to finish the race and finish timely. And so I just went out there and got my groove on. What I didn't anticipate, Terry, was what some people may not agree with, but to me, it was difficult, was the challenge of running back and forth 3 times on what amounted to a little bit over 4 mile stretch. That was tough for me. It was tough having to go out 4.5 miles or so and back, and then out and back, and then out and back a third time. There was something mentally challenging about getting out to kind of a lonely spot on the course where there's not so many fans and not so much, and then having to come back into where there's fans and people cheering for you, where you get motivated a little bit, and then having to go out and do that again 2 more times. That was kind of tough.
Wow. So the run course itself, you just described it a little bit, but actually put that into a little bit better perspective for me. What is it like to be on this course? It sounds like it's a looped out and back?
Yeah. So when you leave transition and you take a right-hand turn and you go out around a little over 4 miles. And then at the 4 mile mark, and this is something that I like very, very much, there was a real clear chip reader, a chip timer that you have to pass over, which dissuades those dishonest scumbags who I hear a lot about and have seen once or twice on different races that no doubt cut the course when they can find an opportunity to do so. This course, it's not possible. And you, at the end of that 4 mile loop, go across your timing chip reader, and then you turn around and run right back into where the run start started. And at that point, the course splits in a Y. If you go to the right, you go to the finish line. If you go to the left, you go run the course again. And so it's a 3 lap loop that you have to do, the last lap of which takes you off to the right to the finish line.
Okay. So as you're making your way on the first loop here, say miles 1 through 10, how are you feeling? What does the atmosphere around you look like? Paint the picture of what it actually looks like to be here.
So it was, I started the run and it was daylight outside, but it was kind of getting to where the sun was setting. So quite frankly, Terry, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It wasn't hot. The temperature was just right. There was a lot of fans. There's a lot of industry, restaurants, bars. So you got all kinds of people that are cheering for you, and there's kids there. I think children are beautiful. I love the spirit, and their youth, and the kids are high-fiving you, and it's just magical. And you run out of that, you run past the area where all the cruise ships are disembarking their passengers. So there's passengers there that are cheering on you. It's really, really neat. Then when you get down towards the end, maybe around 3 miles in, it's a little bit more desolate. There's a tiny little upgrade, a little hill there, a little false flat that makes you work a little bit. And then there's an area on the left that I remember. It looked like it was a hotel, a white hotel that ultimately will be your run special needs bags will be hung. And that white hotel had a lot of fans that were set up on chairs, and they were cheering for you. So it was really cool. It was really cool. I liked it a lot. Then you get past that little desolate, lonely area. You make your turnaround, and then you have the mental, the mental strength of knowing that soon I'm going to get back into that industry. I'm going to get back to those people cheering for me, and it's kind of cool. I think it was kind of cool.
Wow. So, did you have any cramping or GI issues at this point?
I didn't have any GI issues. Strangely enough, what I had was I had stomach cramps, Terry, but it wasn't like stomach cramps like GI issues where I felt like I needed to go to the bathroom. They were physically like my stomach muscles, my abdominal muscles were cramping really, really badly. In fact, my race manager videotapes my runs because that's one thing I focus really hard on putting together better. And at one point on a videotape, I hear myself, I don't remember saying this, but I clearly on tape, was my God, my abs are cramping so bad, which is weird. I've never had that happen before. I've never had it happen in a workout, swim. I've never had it happen when I was a kid, ever. But my abdominal muscles were cramping, which is kind of weird. But yeah, I never had any GI issues. I felt pretty good all the way through the run in terms of like my gut. I did get really, really tired, and I could definitely feel the day wearing on my legs, which was one reason that I was thankful that at one point, I don't honestly remember if it was where it was at, but Harold, my coach, Harold Wilson, and we caught each other on the run, and give him crazy props. You know, Harold Wilson could have very easily broken 11 hours and done a lot better than he did if he wouldn't have slowed down to run with me. You know, I was a Marine before I became an attorney, and one thing that we pride ourselves on is never leaving another Marine behind. And the circumstances are very different in racing than they are in the Marine Corps or in that environment. But the fact that Harold was willing to compromise his race, slow down for me, it meant the world to me. At that point, he didn't just become, he'd already been my friend and he was my coach. But at that point, he became referred to as a battle buddy. He knew I was suffering. He knew that my race didn't go the way I hoped it had been. And he sacrificed himself to be there with me, which is something I'll never forget. And quite frankly, you may hear in my voice, it's humbling. It's humbling to me that he would do that for me. And I love him forever for doing that. And in a straight up manly way, that dude is a boss for sacrificing himself for me when I needed him the most. And I'll never forget that.
Wow. So as you're making your way past the halfway mark of 13 here, how are you holding up mentally? You've already got the halfway point. It's already getting dark here. What is this like for you?
At that moment, I was happy because I knew it was going to happen. I knew it wasn't going to happen fast. I knew it wasn't going to be, glorious in terms of time. But in a twisted world, Terry, in my world, it was my greatest accomplishment in terms of athleticism. And I say that is because when the whole world crashed around me on that swim, I suffered on the bike in terms of time, when my overall time at that point was clearly not what I hoped for, as evidenced by the fact Garmin watch flashed up low battery, and I couldn't even really see what was going down because the face of my watch was covered with the words low battery. I knew that was going to be, when I finished, one of my greatest athletic accomplishments because I overcame so much personal adversity. And I know there was a lot of people that it was their greatest race. I know there was a lot of people that had brilliant times that were far better than mine. I know there was a lot of people that were both better and worse athletes than me that did better than I did. But deep down inside, I was quite happy that, one, I was going to finish the race, and two, I was going to get to demonstrate to my daughter who was there that her daddy didn't quit. And that was magical to me, man. It really was. I know it wasn't the best time. I know it wasn't the sexiest time. I know it wasn't my best performance. But to me, it was my greatest athletic accomplishment that I could give out. And as a 50-year-old man at that moment, that's the best I had. Wow.
So from miles, say 18 to 23, I know you're suffering pretty well, and it's going to be a solid finish of right about 15 and a half hours, but you still haven't gotten there yet. These are usually known as the darker miles, the more hard miles. How are you getting through this mentally?
I'm just, I keep telling myself that my daughter's there and my wife is there and Rick is there. My coach is finished. He sacrificed his time to run with me for a while, and that all this wouldn't matter. It wouldn't add up to anything if I didn't go across the line. And I know I've heard people say many, many times it's about the journey. It's not about the finish line. And that's true to some extent. But when you're this deep in a race, this deep in yourself in terms of depletion and in terms of just being gutted, At that point, it was opposite for me, Terry. It was all about the finish line. And I come from a real unique sort of cloth that says I'll drag myself across that finish line, literally, even if it's 21 hours and everyone's gone before I quit. And I knew there was a lot of people at that point, a lot of people that were walking around me, and I didn't walk. And you may not be able to tell from my time, but it may have been an aggressive shuffle at best, but I did not walk. I told myself, you're going to finish this race and you're going to finish it running. And that's what I did.
Wow. That's got to be mentally hard for you to stay running at just a hard shuffle for hours on end, especially after a mentally taxing swim and a mentally taxing bike ride as well in the wind. I mean, I don't know if I've experienced the wind down in Galveston, and that's only for 56 miles on a flat course. And that's just a mental beatdown. And you dealt with that for nearly 7 hours of just solid wind. And then you're out here for a marathon just shuffling, knowing that you got to get this done.
Yeah, so a lot of people, Terry, say that there's 4 elements to triathlon. I think there's 5. There's swim, there's bike, there's run, there's nutrition, and attitude. You know, everybody that lines up to do an Ironman understands the swim, the bike, and the run, and to some extent the nutrition. In order to, if you want to finish races and or do well in races, when the going gets tough, really, really tough, you've got to exercise that 5th element or you're not going to make it. If you don't have extraordinary mental toughness and just keep telling yourself the cliche that Ironman uses so frequently, anything's possible. If you don't believe that with every fiber of your being, if you don't want to finish as bad as you want to take your next breath of air, you're not going to finish. And people are bailing all around you. When you're that late in the race like I was, people are quitting. People are dropping like flies. There's ambulances that are there picking people up on the side of the road. I mean, it's as ugly as you imagine it could be. You've got to fight through that with every fiber of your being. Not because there's anything glorious at the end. I'm not going to get a podium finish. I'm not going to get a Kona slot. You know, there's a lot less people there cheering for me than there were, 4, 3, 2 hours earlier. But what's there for me is just personal satisfaction of knowing that I can do this. I did do this. And despite the circumstances, I did it. It may not have been, like I said, as fast and as sexy as I hoped it would be, but it's a finish. And it's one that was, in an effort towards honoring the gifts that God has given me of athleticism and of athletic ability and just of mental stamina and just pride in belonging to such a special team. It's Big Sexy Racing. And I just felt all this, I don't want to say it's pressure, Terry, but I just felt all this motivation to make this happen. It was there to watch you.
Right. Man. So usually this part is when I would normally ask what kind of nutrition plan that you had for the run, but it seems like you were just holding on as much as you could. Is that about right?
Yeah. So I used the same nutrition makeup, the same macronutrient makeup on the bike that I do on the run. And I did use those same baggies of nutrition, and I mix my own water. When I go through transition stations, I mix my own bottles. But at this point, I decided that I was going to sort of ditch the bottle that I was carrying, because strangely enough, I was so tired that it just felt sort of heavy to me. So, which is funny because people would laugh when they think that a water bottle feels heavy. But when you're this late in the game and this deep in yourself, that bottle just seems so damn heavy to me that I ditched it, Terry. I wish I could remember exactly what mile marker was at. I just don't. I don't remember. But I remember ditching it and just relying very heavily on whatever it was that they had there in the aid stations. And I took some advice from an old friend who's raced long course for many years, and I consumed every single thing that was there at the aid station, everything, except for the cashews and the peanuts.
Stay away from those.
Yeah, that's right.
Man.
If you want to stay out of the Porto, stay away from the cashews and the peanuts, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
So mentally, looking back on it, how hard was this race for you?
It was really, really hard. Every Ironman is hard physically, Terry, like I'm sure you know. This was hard for me mentally because it didn't pan out the way I expected to. You know, I'm capable of putting a 1 hour swim together, a 5+ hour bike, and a 340 run. You know, that's just around 10 hours, man. And, you know, on a flat course, on a perfect day, I really thought that I could give even more than that and break 10 hours and maybe do something magical. You know, what happens is if you're a competitor, if things don't go your way, it's really, really hard to give up. And an old coach that I love very, very dearly from high school told me once, you know, his name is Coach Ed Fye. If you quit now, you'll be a quitter for the rest of your life. And that resonates with me, man. And so as between quitting and giving up and stopping, and believe me, there was times on this race in the swim when every fiber of my being was screaming, dude, just chalk it up, raise your hand. There's no shame in self-preservation. You can live to race another day. I just couldn't do it. And so mentally, it was really, really tough. That was the hardest part. Physically, every race is hard. Mentally was harder because I was so crestfallen about falling short of what I expected. This is only my third Ironman. And a lot of people have told me, including people that are far better athletes than me, not to beat myself up so much about it because it takes people a long time sometimes to get to qualify. And I'm not knocking it, you know, but I'm not really super eager or interested in doing the legacy thing. If I go to Kona, I want to qualify. I think I have the ability to do so. There's so many great athletes that I see do that. And I feel like if I try really hard and things come together, I could do that. So that was the hardest part about this race, is that I expected to put something really magical together, and it just didn't happen. So when that didn't happen, the hardest part was acknowledging that wasn't going to happen and yet carrying on despite that. And that's what I did.
Wow. So the final few miles here, you realize that you're actually going to be able to get this in under the cutoffs, obviously, and you are getting closer and closer to the finish line. How is the last 800 yards before the finish line? What was this experience like here at Cozumel?
I'll tell you what was kind of going through my mind. The first thing that I remember thinking about was how sorry I felt for a lot of the people that were behind me. Because there were people that this race for them, Terry, was just as magical for one reason or another as it was to me. And this race may have been their first. Maybe they had loved ones there that wanted to watch them finish as bad as they wanted to watch me finish. And I felt bad for them. I'd never experienced that before. I never thought about that before. That's one thing that I distinctly remember thinking, how bad I felt for some of the people that were suffering behind me. And I mean really suffering behind me. That's the first thing. The next thing I remember as I was getting closer to the finish line was how brilliant all the lights looked, how loud all the fans were cheering, how many little kids were on the side of the road that late into the evening wanting to get high fives. And I remember thinking how cool that was. And then as I got a little closer, like into the maybe 200-meter range, I saw my manager and I saw my wife and my daughter. And at that moment, to be honest with you, I was overwhelmed with emotion. It took a lot for me to hold back tears and just overt crying, because I was so happy that I was going to get to finish and my daughter was there to see me finish. It was a measure of jubilation that I don't recall feeling in a long, long time, just because I wanted so bad for my little girl to see me finish. And so once I got real close, I could hear her screaming, "Go daddy, go daddy, go daddy." And she's a woman now. She'll always be my little girl, but she's 21 years old. She's grown up. And to me, hearing my little girl call me daddy was magical. And then taking a left, you go up the left. And of course, it's like every Ironman finish. There's these epic lights. You can hear all the hubbub and the rigmarole and the screaming. And I did something this time that I've never done before. I've never, ever run with my arms open, giving people high fives and thanking people for being there. But this time I did. I took some time and I ran to the left and to the right, high-fiving people and thanking them for being there and looking people in the face and looking them in the eye and telling them, thank you for cheering for me. And then I decided this was going to be my last moment. And so I gave myself the sign of the cross and ran up that mountain of that mountain that is the little steep wooden ramp that leads up to the Ironman finish, which to me felt like a 25% grade. And I stood there for a minute and thank God, and I accepted my finish at 15 hours and some change.
Wow. So after you finished, what'd you do next?
To be perfectly honest with you, I knew that at that point I was really, really depleted in terms of calories and in terms of electrolytes, because I had urinated one last time before I got to around and my urine was really, really dark, like frighteningly dark. And I knew that I might be on the front end of rhabdomyolysis. I had rhabdomyolysis before that led to kidney failure. And so I was concerned with that. So I went in across the finish line, and they have a great staff of support crew there, medical crew. And I told them, having had rhabdomyolysis before in the Middle East when I was a Marine, that I felt like I was on the brink of rhabdo. My calves were cramping. My abs were cramping really badly. My urine was very, very dark. And I don't tell people things to be morbid. I tell people this because I think it's really important that people acknowledge this. Rhabdomyolysis is a very, very serious illness that affects long course athletes and athletes of all kinds. And it can lead to acute kidney failure, which can be fatal. And the statistics, as I understand them, demonstrate that if you've had it once, you can have it more frequently than not because it causes kidney damage. And so I knew at that moment it was very important to get hydrated. So I went into medical, and they gave me 2 bags, and they got me back where I needed to be.
Wow. So after you get done with the medical and all this fun stuff, how is your recovery process over the next few days?
I suffered the next couple of days as most of us do. I was tired. My legs were sore. My knees were really, really sore. But I focused really hard on hitting my Normatex as frequently as I could. And I also focused really hard on my caloric intake, and I ate like a pig, to be honest with you.
Wow. So what's something that you learned from this race experience that you'd like to pass on to someone who hasn't done this race before?
You know, Terry, the biggest thing I learned about this race was how important the 5th element of long course triathlon is. That is the element of mental toughness. You know, not every race is going to go down the way you hope it will. And, you know, not every part of the race is going to go the way you hope it will. And at that point, like coming to a fork in the road, you've got a choice. You can either, you know, curl up in the fetal position and call it a day, or you can, you know, turn lemons into lemonade and dig really, really deep inside yourself to find out what kind of an individual you are. And while every athlete that crosses the line of a long course race is special in their own way, to some extent, those that suffer for that long are a unique class of individuals who've demonstrated, you know, great intestinal strength and intestinal fortitude and mental strength to finish something that didn't go your way. It's easy to shine bright like a diamond when everything is perfect and when you can put an 8-hour race together. It's the mark of someone who is truly an endurance athlete is somebody who's able to complete a race when it's not so shiny and not so glorious and not so easy.
Wow. So if you could change anything about your race experience and do it over again, what would you change looking backwards?
If I could change anything, it would be impossible, but I would have changed the weather. I would have made the swim different. If And if I couldn't change the weather, I would change my ability to get in the water. I wish I could have been able to practice swim a little bit to figure out before that race, what the water actually felt like, and to figure out a rhythm and timing of my breathing versus the waves. That's the one thing I would have changed. But other than that, I mean, I think that was the catalyst, Terry, to be honest with you, for what ended up being a long, long day was the swim. That was just the hardest part.
Wow. So how could Ironman have made your race experience better?
Dang, Terry, I don't know that Ironman could have done much. I thought the support was fantastic. I thought the event was fantastic. I thought the setup was really cool. I think it's unique. It's different, but I think it's kind of cool having transitioned in two different spots. The fans were just so awesome. The finish line was really remarkable. I just remember it being really bright and really cool. The medical staff was impeccable. I mean, they were amazing. I don't know that they could have changed anything. To me, it was really a magical experience. Despite a not so great time, I thought it was really, really a good race.
Wow. So going into this next year, what are you going to give first-timers some advice for them?
Make sure that you honor your workouts. And that means honor as best you can 100% of your workouts, if you can. And per workout, honor each individual workout. A lot of people, I see a lot of people, they'll have a 3-hour run, and Terry, they'll go out there and run 2 hours and 30 minutes. They'll have
they sandbag it a little bit.
A little bit, yeah,
Just a little bit, just enough to count.
Yeah, and the problem is I'd like to think that the spirit of this journey is in large part the sacrifice that comes with training. And if you put all that stuff together cumulatively, it adds up to an ability to be able to finish something that's extraordinarily hard. And so honor your workouts in totality, and then honor each individual workout, especially if you're going to have a coach that's spending his time and his energy, or her time and her energy, preparing workouts for you. Well, then it makes sense to honor them. That's the first thing I'd recommend. The next thing I would recommend is really concentrate and dial in your nutrition. Nutrition is extraordinarily important. And it's not just calories, it's hydration too. Calories and hydration matter. And so dialing that in is extraordinarily critical. That's the next thing. And then the last thing is if you can, and I learned this from another pro, Didi, if you can train in weather that is close to the race that you can find, or in adverse conditions that may exist when races happen, train in that so that it's not the first time you experience it on race day. And that's some really solid advice. Unfortunately, I live in the hill country. The ocean isn't close enough by where I could go swim in the ocean. So the only opportunity I would ever have to feel what it would feel like there in Mexico would be to go swim in the Riviera Maya. And I didn't get a chance to do that until the day of the race. So that's invaluable advice, I think. And I hope people follow that.
Wow. So, Michael, we covered quite a bit about your race. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I just want to say, thank you, Terry, very much for the opportunity to sort of express, my ideas about what happened. I'm no different than a lot of other athletes that are out there. I may be better than some, and I'm probably worse than a lot, but I try really hard. I love this sport very, very much. It's somewhat new to me, but I have found that there are some really, really cool people in triathlon. And I found that there's some not so cool people in triathlon. It's an individual sport as opposed to a team sport. But I have found that being a part of a team has made it all that much more enjoyable, because I can bounce ideas off of people. I can suffer with people. I can learn from other people, and I can be humbled by other people. And so much of what makes this sport cool is that. So, I'm happy, Terry, that you reached out to me again, because there's nothing magical about this race other than the difficulty that I overcame. but thankful that you gave me a chance to sort of express my ideas and invite you to always reach out to me if there's anything I can do to help you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, this is always so fun. I've had people that have DNF'd races, even pros, and it's so fun to hear everybody's unique experience on every race, and I'm glad that I could bring you on and allow you to be a part of this.
Well, I appreciate it, man, very much.
So what's next for you?
So I think next year, I'm gonna let my body recover. I really suffered a lot on this race, and I can feel it a lot differently than I did the other Ironman events that I raced. So I think this year I'm going to focus on racing bikes pretty aggressively this year. I want to do some crit racing, and then I'm probably going to do Ironman Waco. Or the 70.3 Waco. I think I want to do 70.3, maybe NOLA again. Maybe get up to Boulder and do 70.3 Boulder, and see what happens after that. I want to race a couple of marathons or run a couple of marathons. I don't want to say race them. I don't want to just run them just to do it, and then set myself up for next year, the year after next year, rather. I think I want to race Ironman China.
Wow, that'd be fun.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's going to be a good time.
Wow. So what races are on your bucket list, man?
My bucket list races would be, I'd like to, like I said, I want to race Ironman China. I think that would be great. I really hope and pray that I have a chance to race the World Championship in Kona. I really have made a decision in my mind that that's something that's within the possibilities if I have a perfect race. And, the perfect race is so damn elusive, man. It's so elusive. It's like finding a unicorn. It's like, I don't know, catching a touchdown at the last second of a game for the Super Bowl. It's just so damn elusive. But I feel like it's attainable. So that's the ultimate bucket list race for me. And I hope one day to get there.
Nice. So what's your definition of a perfect race?
I mean, a perfect race is one where I can visualize it in my mind. And I try to do this the night before every race. I can visualize in my mind everything down to the minute of me exiting the water, to every, bonk break or two that I take. And everything is in terms of timing coming out exactly like I imagined it the night before. If you can think of something, if you can imagine something and you can memorialize that in writing, for example, that your body will follow. And, the problem is I can visualize these things and I reduce them to writing, Terry, but they just haven't come together yet. So the day that what I imagine in my mind, and I'm able to do both physically, what I prove I can do in training, when those two come together, that will be a perfect race. Because like I said, I know I can swim a 104. I know I can. I've done it. I know I can swim less than a 1 hour, 3,800 meter swim. I know I can bike 112 miles and, somewhere between 5:15 and 5:25. I know I can because I've done it. And I know that I can run a marathon in less than 3:50 because I've done it. It's just putting all those together that's difficult. And, that would equate to a perfect race.
Wow. Well, Michael, it's been great. I've enjoyed hearing your story, and I look forward to following you next year, man.
Thank you so much, Terry, for the opportunity. And I appreciate very much this forum and invite you to call me in the future if I can ever answer any questions, man.
Awesome. Well, you have a good day, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Right on, Terry.
What I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.